Hi, I'm Joe.
And I'm James.
And this is the Decahedron RPG Podcast.
Hi, James.
Hi, Joe.
You know what today is?
No, what is today?
Today is Feedback Friday. And you know what that means?
Oh, mail call.
Mail call from the United States of America.
All right. So today is going to be a quick little mail call episode. Because we have such a backlog of voicemails, I'm going to run 2 episodes every week until we're caught up. We have our normal Wednesday episode, and then we'll have Feedback Fridays. Today, they are all from Jason. Surprise, surprise. We did have some from Evil Jeff. Those are in the episode that we're playing next Wednesday. So if you tune in on Wednesday, you will hear those. But for these are the ones from Jason. And the first one was from episode number 27. We talked about where do dungeons come from? And Jason sent in this.
Hey guys, just listen to your latest episode. I understand the desire to make dungeons make sense. I am able to avoid that usually. That's probably because I don't run long campaigns. So if your campaign's only a few months long, you can get away with it a lot easier, right? You can have a dungeon a wizard built as a test, like we see in the Krongar stories by Gardner Fox, or you can see you could do something like what we have in Red Nails, of course, by Robert E. Howard, or, when you look at Tunnels and Trolls, the dungeons in Tunnels and Trolls are just, built as challenges for the adventurers, and they charge them to go in and try their luck, and it's kind of silly, but for a shortish campaign, that works better than a long-term campaign. Although in a long-term campaign, I do feel you get away with one or two of those. Not every dungeon could be that, but you could have 1 or 2 dungeons that are challenges or, things like that. But I think the idea of lost cities that have been buried over, the mythical Seattle Underground like we see in the Night Strangler movie with Darren McGavin, or there are a bunch of options here, I think. And I don't think it's a bad idea to have them make sense. And a lot of your dungeons, if they're not mega dungeons, they can be crypts and they can be lost temples, and they don't necessarily have to be underground. I mean, you can have multi-story buildings, right, that are dungeons. So there are a couple ideas, though, on these ever-changing dungeons that don't make sense, called the Mythic Underworld. And I've sent you a link to a blog post. Philotomy's Musings is maybe the first place that's talked about, and that's quoted in its entirely in the blog post, and there are links to other things, and the blog author writes about some other things. And then I also mention Dr. John Eric Holmes' book, The Maze of Peril. Of course, Dr. Holmes wrote the first basic set for D&D, that blue box basic set in, 77, I think? And Holmes wrote a book called The Maze of Peril, which is a fiction book. But in that, he uses the Mythic Underworld idea. And it's funny because when you read that book, it reads much more like a Tunnels and Trolls than what I think of D&D. So Holmes, even though his rules seem pretty serious, probably played a pretty lighthearted game. I mean, his book has, centaurs being taken to court because they broke through the floor of a bar and having to pay damages to the bar owner. So it's kind of a lighthearted book. I mean, it's serious. There's character death, things like that in there. But, when you read Holmes's book, and he wrote a lot of short stories for Dragon Magazine as well. There's collections of them out there, although they're super duper expensive. But if you have old Dragon magazines, you can find old writings of Holmes. His stories show a world that, strikes me much closer to the Tunnels and Trolls kind of fiction than, or at least the tone of the Tunnels and Trolls books than the tone of the D&D books. But I've prattled on long enough, so thank you for that latest episode. Really enjoyed it, and I look forward to your next one.
James?
I'm not sure what to say on that. I'm going to disagree with him. I still have this idea that a dungeon has to have a purpose. It just can't be, sake of argument, in the middle of woods guarded by pixies. And it's a massive dungeon and there's nothing going on inside.
I don't think he said anything like that. Anyway, so there's 4 things. I put up 4 fingers while I was listening, but I didn't take notes. So good luck for me remembering them. So first one is John Eric Holmes. John Eric Holmes is very special to me because he wrote the first version of D&D that we ever played. Mm-hmm. The little blue cover that you got for Christmas. Everyone calls it the Holmes edition. He wrote that. So he holds a special place in my heart because he was my introduction to the hobby. I will say, however, in interviews with his son, Christopher, there was Oh, I can't remember. The Wizard's Attic, maybe? No, it's, dang it. If I remember the name of the blog, I will find it and I will put it in the show notes. Right now, it's skipping my mind. There was a blog where this dude had somehow acquired Holmes's draft for basic D&D. And he went through it like page by page and was comparing the draft to the final copy, because Holmes didn't throw in all those things for, to go beyond third level, grab advanced Dungeons and Dragons. He didn't know that was going to be a thing. That was added by someone in TSR. So yeah, anyway, the blog did, the comparison of all, what finally came out versus what was in there. But he also did interviews with Holmes' son, Chris Holmes, and Chris Holmes has been in some podcasts I've listened to. And Chris Holmes said that his father didn't really play D&D. His father played what we now call Arduin. And so that's why maybe his stuff doesn't sound very D&D-ish. I mean, Arduin is really just a D&D set of house rules to the extreme. But so that's why that doesn't sound like that. Dungeons don't have to be underground. I agree completely. And in fact, one of the things I've been wanting to do for a long time, but I haven't done it, it's both underground and not, is I've been wanting to make an inverted dungeon that's on a mountain. So your lower levels are really the upper levels. So at the base of the mountain is going to be like your orcs and your goblins and all those. And as you go up the mountain, it gets more and more challenging until the very top of the mountain. That's where the dragon lives, because from the top of the mountain, he can fly off and he can steal cattle and all that stuff. But, with a few levels in between there. Mega dungeons. Yeah, for some reason, I've always wanted to make a mega dungeon, and I never really have. My very first dungeon in itself was 1, 2, 3, 4. It was 6 pages of graph paper was the first level. And then there was a staircase going to the second level. And I never finished the second level. There was a riddle on the door to the staircase that people would have to answer. Unfortunately, no one ever got it because I had no second level prepared. I would have winged it. There is a gamey thing I like about Mega Dungeons is that it gives the players, you do the traditional as you go down in levels, or in my other example, as you go up the mountain, you're going to encounter higher levels of challenge, but you're also going to encounter higher levels of reward. So it gives the players that choice. Do we want to go there knowing there will be more challenge for the additional reward? And when you have the mini dungeons, you take that, we're going to call it player agency. You take that level of player agency out of it. Okay, you're 5th level, so I'm giving you a 5th level dungeon. That's me. What was the other thing he said? Not every dungeon needs to make sense.
Right. He said not every dungeon needs to make sense. And I'm going to disagree on that.
Well, no, he says not every. So if you're playing the campaign and you run across one silly little one, I think I'd be okay with that.
Okay.
And just because it doesn't make sense to you doesn't mean that it doesn't make sense. It means that you just haven't figured out what the sense is, right? So,
true.
So I'll give it that. I think that's all I have to say about that. Do we have time for another one?
Sure. Go on.
All right. Let's do from episode number 29, where we talked about rolling treasure. That was actually answering one of Jason's questions. So let's do it.
Hey, guys. Jason here. Just listened to episode 28, I think. No, 29. Rolling treasure. Wow, I'm screwing this up, and I can't re-record it because it's been missing. So, great episode. Do not hold against me that the only thing I drink is coffee, water, and alcohol. But, I mean, we have one of the three in common. You guys drink water. So, Hackmaster, beautiful, beautiful books. I actually don't have the old Hackmaster. I have the new Hackmaster books. They all have faux leather covers. Beautiful, beautiful. All 3 volumes there's 2 volumes, I think, of the new the best read for that, the Hackapedia or whatever it is.
Hey, Jason, I'm going to interrupt right here. Yeah, I'm very curious about the newer edition of Hackmaster. How does that differ from the first edition rules-wise? The first edition I always avoided because it was just A, too much text. I didn't want to read that many books. And B, it was based on second edition AD&D, so it was very crunchy. That's not my thing. So is the first, is the newer edition still that crunchy? Colin, let us know.
As far as rolling for treasure, I don't disagree with what you guys are saying, to be honest. I definitely agree that Wandering Monster tables should be catered for the location. And, lately, I'm kind of like Joe. I run a lot of games that don't use, I don't run D&D. I play in D&D kind of games because that's what other people want to run. But I run other games. I run Barbarians Lemuria as a fantasy game, but that's sword and sorcery. So a magic item's more likely to be cursed than anything. In treasure, you just have to dump at the end of the adventure to get your experience. You have to squander your loot so you can get experience in that game. So, and the other games I run are modern games, so the treasure's not really applicable, right? So the thing is, if you run rules as written, yes, I know, haha. But if you run D&D, TSR D&D, rules as written, especially AD&D, when you look at the experience for magic item, even if you roll up randomly, because I actually do prefer to roll randomly, but it's okay if you don't get any items that are applicable to the party because you can sell them. And you get more experience points for selling magic items than you do for using getting a magic item and using it. So it's actually okay to get that magic item your party can't use because you can sell it. And then you not only get a bunch of experience, you get a bunch of gold, and you need that gold because you have training. And I know how you guys feel about training.
So James, when you listened to this before we recorded, you said experience for gold for selling magic items? And I said, I don't know, look it up. Did you look it up?
No, I was too busy. But I mean, when we played, you never got experience points for selling treasures. You got experience points for getting it out of a dungeon. But why would you get experience points for selling?
Because it's gold, right? So if you found a painting in the dungeon and the painting's worth 10,000 gold, when you bring that out of the dungeon and you sell it for 10,000 gold, you get 10,000 experience points. So why wouldn't it be the same for magic items? On the other hand, I also remember Gygax saying that you don't get treasure for experience points for magic items because the magic item itself is its own. So I don't remember the exact rule in AD&D. If someone wants to look it up and let us know, I'm very curious. But as for the selling it, if you're going to equate it to the painting, and then the reason for selling it is because let's say you bring up a 10,000 gold piece gem, but you only manage to sell it for 2,000. Why should you get 10,000 experience points? You'd only get 2,000, right? And so you have to go by the price that you sell it for. The other thing I'm going to say is that the world that you're describing there, Jason, is a world I do not like to run. I hate worlds where magic items are so common that people just come across them and sell them willy-nilly, and that you have the, Eddie's Emporium of magic items. I guess Eddie's Enchanted Emporium would work better. It's more alliterative. Anyway, yeah, I don't like that kind of world. I hate that kind of world. You could still probably sell a magic item, but to get the fair and right price, you would have to go out and find the person who wants that item, and it would be a quest of its own. Anyway, that's just my preference for a world. James, any other thoughts there?
No, I'm thought out on that one.
Right. Let's continue.
Anyhow, thank you so much again for answering my question. I really enjoyed listening to it, and I look forward to your next episode. And I'll have to think about, I've got a question for you. Here's an easy one. What was the last role-playing that you guys played? The last session was of what?
Hey, thanks, Jason. So for everyone, that last part, James and I do a question at the end of every episode. It's kind of a get to know us better. And if you want to write in or call in, let us know your answer to the question. That's fine too. We'll play them. And James had wisely reached out to everyone and said, hey, why don't you send us your questions? And so that was one that Jason sent. We listen to the voicemails as they come in, which is sometimes weeks before we respond to them on the air. And so we've already responded to that one. But we do thank you, Jason. And I do want to let everyone know that Jason is the host of the Nerds RPG Variety podcast or cast. I've already talked about that in a different episode. Anyway, it's a great show. He talks a lot about media. I enjoy it a lot. It's one of the shows I subscribe to. So yeah, thanks for the question. We've already answered that one, Jason. I think we're also going to wrap this one up. We, on the last episode recorded, which will be the next one you hear, did not get to ask a question because we ran out of time. So I do have a question for you, James, and then we're going to wrap up.
Go for it.
The question is, who was your childhood celebrity crush?
That is a hard one. There was a lot of lovely ladies. Just let's say all of the angels.
Oh, all right. That's interesting. So as a child, you were, for lack of a better word, lusting after adult women.
Didn't all kids?
No. So I'm about to give you my list, and my list were all people that were my own age. So that's interesting. And by my own age, that doesn't mean that if you were to look up when they were born in IMDb, that you would say, oh, yeah, that's the same year Joe was born. Because of the way TV works, you see something reruns years and years after it's was first made. And so you're watching a person in their past. So my list, I have 3 people, because childhood is a broad range, right? Childhood goes from birth to 18-ish, right? And so depending where on that spectrum you are, my answer is going to be different. So of course at birth, nobody. I'm going to start at my older one. I'm going to go to my youngest one, and then we're going to meet in the middle. So my oldest one, her character name was Barbara Cooper, and the name of the show was called One Day at a Time, and the actress was Valerie Bertinelli. Yeah, little teenage Joe had a big crush on Valerie Bertinelli, and he was devastated when she went off and married Eddie Van Halen because he was convinced that she was saving herself for me.
Sure, Joe. Wishful thinking.
Yep. So I stopped listening to Van Halen back then. All right. So jumping over the Middle Ages and going to younger Joe. Younger Joe was a big fan of Eve Plum, who played Jan Brady, the middle of the Brady girls. And specifically, I remember as a young child watching the Brady Bunch. Well, first of all, the Brady Bunch is the first show where I saw the credits and I asked my mother, how come they all have different names if they're brothers and sister? And my mother explained to me that actors pretend to be somebody that they're not. So that was the show where I learned that. But anyway, Eve Plum, there's an episode where Jan gets her glasses and everyone's picking at her and she feels very self-conscious. But I remember thinking that she looked very, very cute in her glasses. And I just wanted to write her a letter and tell her not to feel bad and that she was very pretty and that I liked her. So
and did you do it?
No, I didn't. That is the very young Joe. And in between there is an actress. Her name at the time, I have no idea what it is now. Her name at the time was Pamela Ferding. And I actually had to look that up because nobody knows who that is if you say that. Pamela Ferding. She was kind of a character actress, a child character actress, which sounds weird to say. So, a character actor is one that is never like the headline, the main star of a movie or a show, but they're constantly working. Also called them like a working actor or stuff. Netflix once had this great documentary called That Guy Who Was in That Thing, where it just talks about these character actors and, interviews a lot of them. Like one of the guys says, oh, Star Trek. Everybody does Star Trek, because they go through so many guests. And these days it would be like Law and Order, right? Everyone's been on Law and Order.
True.
But anyway, Pamela Ferding, she was like on 4 episodes of Family Affair as a different character each time. She was in Odd Couple. She was Felix Unger's daughter, Edna. And she also, earlier, she had another character that was completely unrelated, but also on Odd Couple. So I knew her from Odd Couple. I saw her there. And on Star Trek, there is an episode called And the Children Shall Lead, which is one of my least favorite episodes. I hate that episode. Anyway, but she played a character called Mary. And I remember as a young child liking her there. But the place I really remember her from and that she really got my attention, there was this show called Space Academy. I don't know if anybody else in the universe is going to remember it. It was called Space Academy. It was about this bunch of kids pretty much in space. The title tells it all. It starred Jonathan Harris, who was Dr. Smith on Lost in Space. It starred him. And there was eventually a spinoff series called Jason of Star Command. And that one starred, James Doohan. That was a spinoff series. But in their first one, Space Academy, she had a lead role in there. She was the lead female student. And that is where I saw her. That is where she first got my attention. And those are my 3 childhood celebrity crushes.
Okay. Entirely different from me.
Yeah, you were lusting after adults. I was staying in my zone. Anyway, I have nothing left to say about that other than thanks for joining me, James.
Thanks, Joe, for this interesting discussion.
Anyway, thanks everyone very, very much for listening. Please write in or call in. Oh, yeah, James, we have an administrative note. We have a new way for people to leave us feedback.
Okay.
All right. So in addition to calling us at whatever the phone number is, it's in the show notes. I always forget the area code because I grabbed the number from Google Voice because the number spelled RPG Cast, and we have the Decahedron RPG Cast. So I thought that was perfect. But the area code is somewhere in California, which I don't live, but I couldn't pass it up because the number was perfect. So anyway, you can call in. That's Google Voice. They give you like 2 or 3 minutes. That's probably the best option. But if you don't live here in the States, if you have to make a long distance call to leave us feedback, that's not worth it. So the old way was to go to anchor.fm and find our page and click message and record it that way. The problem with that is that you need an Anchor account or a Spotify account to do that. And I know that not everybody wants to do that. Not everybody wants to give Spotify their personal information because they make you make this account. So I found another service. Jason over at Nerds RPG Variety Cast, he uses a service called SpeakPipe. But in a recent episode, he and his listeners were talking about how the audio quality of that sucks. So I'm trying a different one. This one's called Telby. And our URL, though, doesn't say Telby in it at all. So if you want to send us feedback and you don't want to call in, I picked this one because it doesn't collect any personal information. There's an option where I could have made you left an email address or something. I turned that off. Right now, I'm currently using the free version. If it works well, I will actually pay for it. The URL is say hi as one word. So SAYHI, sayhi.chat/Decahedron. DEKAHEDRON. It's the name of the podcast. So sayhi.chat/Decahedron. Go there, use the microphone on your computer, and you can leave us a 60-second message. So that is the new way that you can leave us feedback. Anyway, please do leave us feedback. It really keeps the show going. It makes me feel that we have people who like us. That's all I have. Bye, James.
Bye, Joe.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Decahedron RPG Cast. We'd love to hear from you. You can leave us a voice message by calling 562-774-2278. That's 562-RPG-CAST. Or by visiting sayhi.chat/Decahedron. You can also email us at feedback@decahedron.com. Links are in the show notes. For more information, visit decahedron.com. Remember that Decahedron is spelled with a K. Music is by Kevin MacLeod. Logo is by Design Cat. Thanks again for listening, and until next time, keep those dice rolling.